Hello everyone, I'm Eli and I'm a YouTube gardener who's based here in Scotland, just like you. So quite often then, you'll see people like me on YouTube or on social media and we're growing plants in our garden. Like just now, I've got plants out even though it's clearly cold and winter. And you might think, oh, that means I can do it. Unfortunately, it's not always the case, and it's not always easy to tell if it's the case, especially when those folk aren't in an area close to you. So let's chat about a way that you can know if this is something you can do. And it's based on something called hardiness ratings, which we have here in the UK, and they're really useful. But, as I said, it's actually quite cold. So let's do it in the greenhouse, because this isn't pleasant. Let's go. So I'm just sorting out all the seeds that I'm going to be growing and in which months. And as you can see, I've got lots growing in my greenhouse just now. Now, it isn't a magic trick. I'm not using heating in my greenhouse to grow all of these. I just know about 3 terms we can use for plants that help us to decide what we can grow. And that is tender, which means plants that really won't cope with cold weather. Half hardy, which are plants that will cope with some of the cold weather we get in winter, depending on how bad it gets. And hardy, which generally is the plants that will cope in your garden if they're hardy to your temperatures. There is a whole rating that tells you about the temperatures that plants will cope with and the conditions, and we're going to talk about that because it is so useful and it's what lets me keep growing all year round. So let's look at that. Now this is something called hardiness ratings, and it is by the RHS, or the Royal Horticultural Society, who actually have lots of really great useful information for all gardeners in the UK. And these ratings they have come from 1 to 7, from tender all the way through half hardy to hardy. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to try and simplify this for you guys, and we'll try and still keep it a bit fun because, you know, gardening's meant to be fun. And we're going to talk about it from rating 1 all the way through, and I'll try and give you some images in your head to help you attach it to your growing. And we're going to start with H1, which is the first scale on the rating, which is for those super wimpy plants that basically will keel over if you look at them the wrong way. Now, H1 then, it's broken into 3 classifications. So we're going to start with H1A. Now, I said these were super wimpy. It's probably a bit mean saying that, but in terms of our gardens and our climate here in Scotland, it kind of is. These are the plants we probably consider to be tropical plants, and you'll often see these labelled as to be grown under glass. Now, obviously, I'm currently in my glass greenhouse, but that generally means under glass with controlled conditions. So usually it's going to mean heating and lighting, and that is all the time, through the night, all of that kind of thing. In which case, you're also going to need ventilation because it needs it to be controlled, not the whole ups and downs that we generally see in our hobby glass houses and our gardens. Now, if you're ever wondering and you're researching what to grow and where, look at the temperatures that those little plants can cope with, because an H1A plant, or a plant that's rated H1A, wants it to be consistently above 15C minimum. So we're talking here, that's our really nice kind of summery type weather. We want it to be that all the time, including at night. Now you kind of get why I'm saying these are the wimpy guys and they need to be in a heated, controlled greenhouse. So if we were thinking about H1A in terms of us and our gardening, how about those beautiful summer days where it's too hot to garden, you're in your shorts, your bikini, whatever it is, and you're lounging with a little drink of something by your side and just enjoying the weather? That's the H1A. So the plants that like that weather, that's those plants. Now next, I said H1 has been broken into these categories. So H1B makes sense to be next. Now H1B is in that same little category, so we're still talking the major wimps of the plant world here. But they're slightly better than the H1As. So it's still plants that will only like to be out on those sunny, lovely, gorgeous days. But to be honest, they'll still do much better in your greenhouse than out in your garden in Scotland. So these are plants that want to be minimum above 10C, and that is a minimum. Ideally, we're wanting them to be pushed out to the above 15C if possible. Now, the H1C, again, is still in this wimpy category, but you can see that we're starting to get tougher and tougher as we go. Although tougher's probably not the right term because they're still not on to the half-hardy stage yet. But they like it to be above 5C minimum, but would actually prefer your minimums to be around the 10C. So they're getting a little bit tougher, but they're still on the wimpy scale. H2 then. Okay, to give you an idea of H2, because we're that one step up, we're a tiny, tiny bit tougher than the super wimpy plants, but these little guys still will not tolerate even a light frost. So you want these guys to be super protected if they're out there at all. They will not, absolutely not, cope with being frozen. So they may survive temperature-wise 1C minimum, so you'd prefer it to be above that. But if they do get that touch of frost, it's not going to be good. So you want to keep these guys really protected, but also winter's maybe not the time for them because you can't guarantee it's always going to be above 1C. So it's one to think about. H3 then, think of it like this. That's you out gardening and you've got, sensible shoes on and your trousers on and maybe a jumper or a hoodie and you're out just getting the job done. They will cope with some light frost, but they will pretty much need protection and they won't cope with long extended periods like we tend to get here in Scotland. So these guys will probably be okay in your garden with a bit of protection, but, still keep an eye on them. So remember I said half hardy? So you can see that we're now getting to a point where we've got plants that will cope with some of our wintry kind of temperatures, but they won't just cope full scale. So you still need to give them that little bit of help. But, it gives us options. Now, the next part of the scale, we're getting into this tougher plants now. Now, H4 plants, these guys can cope properly. They don't really need any kind of special treatment or support, and they'll pretty much do okay in most Scottish gardens from the central belt down. So I know these guys cope in my garden, and I can grow them throughout winter. These guys are proper dependable. So if I say hardy, you're now starting to understand. So we've gone from tender plants, which are super wimpy, to half-hardy plants that, they aren't the Rambos of the plant world, but a little bit of support, they'll kind of cope. We're now into hardy territory. Hardy are those plants that basically laugh at Mother Nature and are like, bring it on. So the next one's then H5. H5 then, in terms of you gardening, we're now talking probably a woolly hat and some gloves to add to your jumper and your jeans and things, just to keep the nippy bits off. 5 plants will cope with pretty much all of the winter weather we can throw at them in the majority of the UK. So these guys will cope down to about minus 15C. So, you guys who are up north and get some proper unexpected spells where it really goes down further than that, these are maybe a bit of a risk, but they're reliable enough that you might want to take that risk. H5 then are the proper little tough guys. Now the next 2 parts of the rating, we've got H6 and H7. These guys are a bit like the proper outdoor adventurers. These are the guys that would go wild camping if you let them. H6 plants, these guys will cope down to kind of minus 15 to minus 20C. So they're pretty much sorted for all of us in Scotland. These are the hardy, reliable little guys that you really will see lots of us online growing over winter. like my greenhouse now. They'll cope with frost and they'll cope with freezes. These guys are proper reliable, and it's the kind of stuff I'm growing just now in my garden. Now, H7. These guys are the Royal Marine Commandos of the plant world. They will cope with everything that can get thrown at them in Europe in winter. We're talking -20°C, and these guys will battle it. That then is our RHS hardiness ratings for tender plants, half-hardy plants and hardy plants. So the next time you're wondering, how come that person online has grown those plants and can I do that? Go and have a quick research online and see if you can find out what temperatures they can withstand, or if there is a little label telling you they're H1, H4, H7. And if it helps, you can pop over to the RHS website and they have lots of this info. And me personally, I'm about an H3 gardener, so I'm heading back in for a hot drink because my hands are freezing. I hope that's been good for you then, guys, and I hope it's been really nice for you to see that there are actually gardeners on YouTube and social media based in Scotland just like you. So it gives you more of an idea of what's going on in your garden. Now, I'm off inside, but I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and remember, you're never too old to play in the dirt. See you guys.